Well, hello again, Jeannie, and as you can see, here's the photograph of your stitch out from a floral design. And on this one you've tried out a variety of digitizing techniques and effects which have really created some nice visual interest on this subject. There's a great deal going on in this design, and it's not small, 6 inches by 8 inches or 15 centimeters by 20, so that means that you'd have to use your 200 by 200 hoop, I imagine, on your Jeannie 11,000. And there's definitely a lot of work gone into this design, I can tell. Right, so what we started off with was you've got 3 different fill types in there, and you've applied different effects to those. The first ones that you've got, for example, are a plain fill. The Wilcom people know that as a weave or a tatami. On these leaves, it's just a plain fill. On this leaf, you've done that same plain fill, but you've put carving stitches onto it. On this flower, you've used a pattern fill or a weave fill, and this one's called random. And you've used lots of different stitch angles with this one, and that creates a great effect with it. And then you've also used the plain fill up here on the tulips. Now you've used them in a lighter density, and you've used 2 different layers in 2 different colours. And on these you've used a graduated fill to help with the blending of one colour through to another. You can't see it too well given the colour of the threads that you've used on your stitch out, but certainly when you look at the digitizing design you can see it. And then you've also added to that a wave effect, which again you can't see too clearly on the stitch out, but it's very visible on the actual design itself as you've digitized it. The next fill type that you've used is a motif fill, and that's here on the lily. You've used 2 layers of that, and the motif that you chose is what's known as a fur fill. It gives you a light density, and so that the 2 colours of thread that you've used together with the colour of the background give you your colour blending. And when you're doing light density work, you really do have to remember to take into account that the background acts as an additional colour. So 2 thread layers plus the background gives you a 3 colour blend. Your other motif fill is these flowers over here, and again you've used a fur stitch, a different one from the lily, and you just used the 1 layer on this one, so that together with the background fabric here gives you your 2 colour blend. Another pattern fill that you've used is this pavement pattern here. In Embird that's known as a pattern fill. The Wilcom people know it as an embossed fill, and in fact you've actually used that same one, even though they're on quite small little bits, here for the stamens in the roses. And finally, another sort of stitch that you've used as a fill here is what's called strips in Embird, a strip fill. The Wilcom people know this as contour, and on this one you've actually used it in 3 layers. Again, light density work, and it's been used very effectively here. I think you've used a brown layer, sort of like a greeny gold colour, and then the yellow on top. And you've used the same contour fill or strips fill here on this bow. This is version 2, and this here was your version 1. And as we can see here, you've actually changed this bow from what was a pattern fill or an embossed fill to this contour fill like you have here on these daisy flowers. The other thing that you did on this was your first stitch out. The other thing that you did was you lightened off the density on some of these flowers so that you could get your colour blending a little bit better. So let's go back to version 2. Now when it comes to doing the lines, you've used a variety there. Over here of course you've used your sketch line as the outline to give some definition to the rose petals, and also to provide some contrast against that fur stitching, that light density fur stitching that forms the petals. Outlining again over here on the lily, and in fact when you look at a lily plant that's actually quite realistic in terms of what it has, the streaks and the stripes in it. It's a great effect for the lily. And then you've also used outlining to define aspects of the tulip. Now that sketch stitch, when you have it on a wider setting, is like the Wilcom stem stitch, and when you put it very narrow or on a 0 setting, it becomes like the Wilcom back stitch. And you could actually have used that as another alternative. If you wanted a lighter touch rather than a thicker outline, you can actually narrow the stitch and it gives quite a nice effect. Now the other thing that you used that sketch stitch for was to construct these daisy leaves here. And my goodness, that must have been an awful lot of work, because I know what you've done. You've come out with a run line and back with the sketch, out with the run line, back with the sketch, out with the run line, back with the sketch. And in fact I know that there's 122 objects in that green, just in the daisy leaves alone. Goodness me, that was a lot of digitising involved in that one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an idea whereby you could have cut down on some of that work. And what we'll do now is we'll go across and take a look at the planning. Now your process is quite clear here, and as you explained in your note as well, you started off and what you did was you put your colouring in, and then you used that to help you work out what order you wanted to do those colours. So having decided the order in which you're going to digitise the colours, you then go to Embird and you work out the rest of the detail of the pathing of connecting the end of one object to the start of another as you work through the digitising. And then periodically, if there's any need to tidy anything up, that's when you do it, or sometimes you do all the final tweaking and organising at the end. Another way to do it, of course, is to do a little bit more of that planning and organising on paper before you go to the computer. No particular rights or wrongs, it's what suits you and it's what suits the design and what you want to achieve at the time. So coming across into Studio, this is the design, and as you already know, you're pathing in between each colour. So within these sections of colour, that's your red layer under the tulips, and this is your red layer under the lily, and your purple layer under the lily, and then here this purple and this purple. Your pathing between all these objects in there is absolutely perfect. No problems with it whatsoever. In a couple of places though, this is one of them here, there is actually a disconnect. It's not a pathing error, it's just a disconnect between the end of one object and the beginning of another. So if we actually go over into vectors, which is probably a little bit easier to see, and then scroll down here and find out which particular one it is, and there it is. This start node here from this one here, they've just become detached somehow or another. So if I select that one, and let's just go in and magnify, so we can see where we're actually going to go, and then if I click edit nodes, we should be able to see it, and you can see here that's the node of the previous one finishing, and this here, if you can see here, that's the start of this one. So I can either move that manually, and then I can just right click on it and say snap to nearest node. That'll just lock it on completely. I'll hit enter, and then I'll hit Ctrl G to generate the stitches again. Escape. And in fact, if we actually look down there now, we'll see that's gone, and to confirm it, it's up here. So we've sorted that one out. Now in terms of pathing, the only other place whereby you've got some jumps and hops within an individual colour are here in these greens. And let's take that magnification back down so that we can see where we are. And let me just do this so we can see it all a bit better. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say view jumps in here, and as you can see, this here is where you've changed colour, and this is one jump across to another over this. Now go into normal, probably see it better, over this rose. You could have perhaps come from here and around in the rows, or you've chosen to make the jump. Now this is the next green here, and I'll just switch that one off, and you've got quite a few jumps on this one. I'll just come away from the picture. You can see you've started here, come down, jumped up to the top of this one and come down. Perhaps you could have put some more run lines in this, but you do have quite a few, and your machine is having to scoot across from one place to another. It's possible here because of the outlining. Maybe you could have put a pathing line in here. You could definitely have put a pathing in line on that one. And of course the next one is where those veins go in on these, and that just adds to the jumps in between these. It's not a major point, however. If you wanted to try and have as few scooting about hops of your machine, then certainly putting in some travel lines in those particular green colours would have helped a little. And now, talking about the green, let's go back and let's just show everything. Whoops, view, take the jumps out, view, and show everything. Let's put it back in. I did say that I would show you an idea for reducing some of the work that was involved in doing those daisy leaves.